Welcome to Rome. I'm Janelle Winters, and I am a PhD student at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm working on our new global health governance project related to the role of the World Bank and global health. So I'm actually doing a kind of cool project on the onchocerciasis control program, which is one of the first health initiatives that the World Bank became involved in West Africa. And I'm kind of looking at the program over the last 40 years and trying to better understand what contributions were made during the program to things like disability-adjusted life years and to the global health landscape. As part of my research, I have the really fascinating option, less option and more reality, the need to go to international archives and try to use sources that often historians have really neglected to better understand, different players involved within the organization in planning these global health kind of initiatives. So right now, I'm at the Food and Agriculture Organization, and you can kind of see the panorama. It's a fascinating place here, right by Palatine Hill in Rome, and I'm going to be meeting with the archivists today and kind of planning out a lot of the research that I'm going to be doing and understanding more about what the collections look like and what the archives look like. So I'm going to take you on a short journey as a global health historian of the kind of sources that you'll find, the kind of people that you'll meet, kind of just what the place looks like. You'd be amazed to know that at FAO, there's only one archivist. He has been there for, I think, about 26 or 27 years. And if you think about it, one archivist for 1,738 professional staff as of the end of 2015 and 1,510 support staff. So you're talking over 3,000 staff and one archivist, which makes the task very challenging. You actually are given your own desk within the library and archives general facility, and then you're given a master codes list. So you'll work with the archivist to kind of look at UN codes with very brief descriptions, try to understand what might be interesting, and then not get too excited, because once you find a code for like a project type that you think would be really interesting, like for me, I'm looking at onchocerciasis, so I actually found a code, UN 1716, which says onchocerciasis control program. So you think gold mine, and yet they only save about they destroy about 93% of the collections that they receive. So usually departments at FAO are responsible for sending their documents in bulk to the archivist, and then they're kept for about 5 years, and then there's a decision made whether they should be destroyed or kept, and only about 7% are kept. So for me, I got sort of lucky. My program ran from 1972 to 2002, and they have some of my folders available from 76 to 82. So once you get your files, they look like this. You're given boxes, which they are very, very friendly within the archives, and they'll bring up to you into your own little researcher room. And then you need to just start going through and seeing if there's something interesting. So I'm going to take you through a few examples of the really fun stuff that I found within the archives. The first thing I'd like to show you is just a report from the Expert Advisory Committee. So this would have been an official report, and at the end of it, you'll often get really interesting appendices. So for instance, here you can see the different members of the advisory committee that were in attendance, and it really helps you think about people that you could interview if you're trying to find out more about what actually happened at the event. To somebody at the World Bank from FAO, and again, it's kind of underscoring how there were some real issues going on in the program about how they had basically justified the onchocerciasis control program in terms of economic development work, but some people were arguing that there really wasn't a lot of way that they developed to measure the economic situation in onchocerciasis-free zones within Africa. So again, here you're seeing that what's written in the actual reports might be a little bit different from some of the concerns people had in the early 80s in the program. This program that I'm looking at was one of the first by the World Bank that actually had an ecological panel. So they were very concerned, especially the Americans and the Canadians, I've discovered, in making sure that at least at the face of the organization, it was very clear that they had a plan so that you wouldn't have insecticides damaging the environment within Africa or minimize it as much as you could. So here, they actually took a clipping from a meeting that occurred in the late 1970s, in which case, and you can see they highlighted it here, basically international experts were criticizing either this program or general vector biology control programs for the environmental impact that they might be having when they tried to control disease transmitting vectors. And side by side this was a letter from people on the ecological committee at FAO. They were kind of up in arms at this little, and they were saying, hey, actually we are doing more than you're realizing. And so you can really kind of see some of the concerns that they had at the time and how important it was to portray the program in a positive light. And this is something called OncoFlash. So it seems that at least in the early years of the program, there was a kind of almost a magazine kind of report that was circulated in Africa. And they have interviews in each one of these that came out at least once a month. And so here you actually have an interview in the late 1970s or mid to late 1970s of an engineer that was involved in the program. So you're getting some kind of primary interviews that you're finding that of people that were not particularly high up in the program, so the people's voice that you often wouldn't have represented. And then finally, you can sometimes find the press clippings, like I mentioned. So this is something in the Financial Times from 1982, and here it's kind of the best of both worlds because you're actually having an article on not just on the African program or the onchocerciasis control program, but on development in general. And they bring up the independent commission that happened during my program by a guy named Berg. And here you can say that the FAO is really getting a little bit into politics here. They've annotated and they've said this is why the World Bank, was insisting on Berg at all costs. So you can see that there's a bit of tension going on, and this can really give you a good window into some of that tension, as well as seeing how the program was represented in the news. Some of the issues that arrive. Well, the first issue in the archives is it's really hard to know exactly what you're going to find until you arrive. So you can Skype with Fabio Ciccarelli, the archivist, and you can kind of understand in general if there's a UN code that might be relevant and if he's able to find it within some of the records. And the more you tell him, the better about your program, so we can kind of find out which branch he might want to look in of the archives. But really, until you arrive, and this is the case in any archive, I mean, a lot of things aren't digitized. They're not usually going to take pictures for you of anything or kind of look at the files before you come. So it's sometimes hard to know exactly what will be in the folders. So I'm going next week to the World Bank and then to the UN again. So I will follow this up with a little bit of series about what to expect of these other organizations, some of the hurdles I've encountered, some of the really interesting finds I've made, and kind of bringing it back to how you can use these resources, which are really underutilized, the archives. I'm thrilled to be inaugurating this blog and come back frequently. We're hoping every 2 weeks, or at least every 2 weeks, to have either one of these video blogs featuring me or traditional written blogs on topics from everything from the World Health Organization elections all the way through details about onchocerciasis in Burkina Faso and the experiences we have of traveling as part of this new research grant and program. So it's great to meet you all, and I'll be back in touch soon. All right.